Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. We're back at Clubhouse 5, just off Leicester Square near Chinatown in London. One of the best sports bars in London to bring you the latest episode. And look who's joined me. It's Doogie Critchley, it's Mikey McCubbin. It's a Continental Club takeover of Sunday Vibes today. Now, you will notice this shoot is slightly more budget than normal. Unfortunately, Zach has been taken ill just before we went to shoot.
He will recover.
He will recover. He's not seriously ill, yeah. But he's got all of our equipment, all of our cameras, all of our mics. So we've only got one camera and our microphones. So there's no cuts and things like that.
It's stripped back.
Yeah, it's a bit old school Sunday Vibes. So we can only apologise if you're watching this. Hopefully, if you're listening, it should still sound absolutely fine. Boys, how are we?
Yeah, not too bad. Not
Yeah.
too bad. I do feel like Zach, being ill just after a 4-1 loss to Man United. A little bit sus.
Very true, actually.
Yeah, they do get well soon, Zach. But yeah, not too bad. Champions League football secured. Although I do go into the final weekend of the Premier League with my paid FPL league. I am top of the league by 3 points going into the final day. And I have no idea what's going to happen because there's almost nothing to play for aside from relegation in the Premier League. I have no idea who's actually going to play in my team, who to bring in. And I bottled it last year as well, so I am
panicking.
I am panicking. I can't lie, I'm panicking.
Nerves. I'm not gonna lie. I started like a train on FPL. I phoned it in. I've not even looked at my team last.
You do
6
that
weeks.
every year, I swear.
Yeah, it just
after
gets
about
lazy. With
October.
it. Yeah, I just get lazy with it. Dukes, how are you?
I'm all right. I don't know whether you'll be able to see on camera because it's quite dark, but if you're worried that I've got a bash on my head, I've not been beaten up. I actually headbutted my bedroom wall in my sleep on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So do not fear for me, I'm fine, but just a bit of a painful sleep injury.
Doogie's an aggressive snoozer.
A very aggressive snoozer. I was actually sleep talking last night and Grace said I was talking about clubs going bust and laughing. And I was just laughing my head off apparently.
Wow.
Very strange guy.
Yeah, so let's crack on with it, shall we? Today, obviously, we are doing our sort of Football Daily Awards / Alternative Awards. The way this is going to work is that Mikey is going to throw us a category. We have been allowed to see most of these categories before the show. Me and Doogie are going to pitch in an answer as to who we think should win that category. Mikey, acting as the commissioner of the Sunday Vibes Dior, will then be able to decide who he thinks should be given the award. He's also got his own suggestions, so if he's not happy with either of ours, I'm sure he will pitch in and give us a better one. Happy with that, Mikey?
I'm happy with it, yeah. I'm happy with that.
Take us
I
away.
look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Let's kick off with, I think, what will be the obvious one. We'll get that out of the way. Premier League Player of the Year. Has anyone got anything other than Erling?
No. I mean, it has to be.
I did think at one stage when Arsenal were 8 points clear with that game in hand, and I thought if they do go on to win the league, I'd like to see an Arsenal player get it. And I was thinking Martin Odegaard would be a good candidate. But the way the season's gone, the numbers that he's hit, 52 goals now in all competitions, I think 36 in the league, 8 more than any other player in Europe's top 5 leagues. Also chipped in with 8 assists, which I think has gone slightly under the radar. I think Aguero matched that tally 3 times in 10 years at Man City. And that's the same amount of assists as Bruno, as Trent, as Robertson, 3 of the best creators that the league has seen in the last 5-6 years. So I think he's done a phenomenal season. And the worries people had at the start of the year about his injury record, etc., haven't really come to fruition. I think he's missed 3 games with injury. And Pep's managed him really effectively as well. I think he's come off or played less than 65 minutes in 10 games this season in all competitions. So I think he's been managed really effectively. He's been the story of the season. And I think for the best individual goal-scoring season the Premier League's ever seen, it could only really be him.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if you win the treble, he scores 50, 60 goals, breaks every Premier League goal-scoring record for maybe the greatest side the Premier League's ever seen, and a potential side that you'd have to say are one of the greatest footballing teams in history if they win the treble, because it's been very rarely done, that he has a very strong case for winning the Ballon d'Or. And if he's going to win the Ballon d'Or, he's obviously got to win the Premier League Player of the Year award.
I think there's no question, is there? I think, interesting what you say about assists as well. I think people do tend to mischaracterise Haaland a bit as just a target man or just a goal scorer. Like, he's always, I think, had that other, side to his game as well. His then cup play is obviously great, isn't it? So yeah, okay, easy one there, out of the way. Young Player of the Year now. Haaland, I believe, would also qualify for this, but are you guys choosing to go a little bit more interesting?
Yeah, I think basically, now this is done 2 ways, isn't it? The Premier League Young Player of the Year award is 23 when the season begins. So there can be 24-year-olds win the Hublot Premier League Young Player of the Year award, i.e. Alexis McAllister, who has been nominated, I believe, for it. But the PFA award is 21 when the season begins, isn't it? So Haaland, I think, does qualify
does.
But I don't think... Number one, I don't think he should be allowed to win both. I know it has been done in the past. Players like Gareth Bale have done it, but I don't think he should be allowed. I think it's Bukayo Saka. I think it's Bukayo Saka. I think he's been an absolute revelation this season. And obviously, he's had the drop-off in recent weeks. His last probably 5 weeks, 7 games have been pretty poor. But pretty poor by his own meteoric standards, which, there's very few players across Europe that have put up the number of goals and assists in terms of double figures that he has this season, let alone at 21, the way he's driven that Arsenal right side forward, because Ben White isn't an attacking fullback, really, is he? So he's asked to an awful lot of attacking output on that right-hand side. I just think his story is so remarkable as well. The comeback after that Euros penalty, the way that he battled like some of the horrendous hate he was getting there at his young age, and then was able to just brush that off to become, in my opinion, the best right winger in the world this season, alongside maybe Rodrigo. And if you're the best right winger in the world at 21, playing in a side that is pretty much Premier League conquering, other than 6 weeks of misery or 5 weeks of misery at the end of the season, where you're battling out with the greatest team the Premier League's ever seen, probably, I think it's remarkable. So I think it has to be Bukayo Saka. I think there are arguments maybe for Martinelli on the other side, but if you were to give me if I was building a super team right now and I could only take one of those two wingers from Arsenal, I would take Bukayo Saka every day of the week.
I'd agree with that. I think Martinelli's slightly more replaceable in that. I mean, there are quite a few left wingers in a similar style to Martinelli. I'm not saying he's quite there yet, but someone like Garnacho kind of reminds me of a lot of the skills that Martinelli brings to the table. Whereas Saka, as you say, with his interplay, his intelligence, I think the fact he can go outside and in so effectively, his link up with Odegaard, his link up with Ben White, I think it has to be him as well. I think he's one of 2 players in the Premier League to get double figures for goals and assists this year, along with Mo Salah, who's had an underrated season by, any metric as well. But I just don't think Salah's had the same exceptional moments that we've seen in previous years, or at least as many of them. Whereas Saka, particularly that United game around the turn of the year, that performance against Spurs where I think he got an assist, I think he scored a winner against Leeds earlier in the season in a 1-0 win, which everyone was saying, that's going to be a big test going to Ellen Road. Of course, as it's turned out, it's not really been much of a test this season. But I think he's stepped up consistently. I think he got 8 goals and assists 2 years ago. Last year was 18, now 24. I'm just so excited to see where he can go next.
Yeah, very solid, very solid. Any other shouts? Did you have anyone else in your thinking when you think about this? I know we've spoken about Martinelli. I think, Saka. I mean, even, Martinelli's, not been on the left all the time, as he Trossard came in as a backup to him. Saka's really had to do it all on his own, hasn't he, on the right? Any other shouts? I mean, got down here, Evan Ferguson outside.
I was going to suggest, if there was been a Rookie of the Year category, which is exactly what I think the PFA Young Player of the Year should be, it should be a rookie category for a player in his debut Premier League season. You shouldn't be able to win it in your 5th Premier League season like Phil Foden has in the past. But I think that Evan Ferguson and maybe even Julio Enciso towards the second half of the season, in terms of rookie campaigns, I think they're the 2 highest scoring teenagers in the Premier League this season, Evan Ferguson and Enciso. I think both of them deserve a shout, but they just haven't quite had enough minutes. I don't think Ferguson's obviously had injury problems, hasn't he? He's been slowly bedded into that side, particularly by Roberto De Zerbi. He's kind of shared minutes with Danny Welbeck. Enciso's coming to the fore more in the second half of the season, as is a player like Alejandro Garnacho, I think, who is also in amongst those sort of goals for a teenager in the Premier League. But I think Evan Ferguson feels like the next cab off the rank in terms of star strikers, doesn't he, in the Premier League? I don't think it's going to be a particularly long time before he moves on from Brighton.
I'd also put, I think he qualifies Michael Elise in this category as well. I think he's had another great year.
10 assists, is it?
Yeah, and one of the moments of the season, I think, was it a winner against United or an equaliser against United? In the final minutes of that free kick, didn't celebrate. One of my favourite moments of the season. How on earth are you that cool on the biggest stage? Jacob Ramsey, I think, has had a great year at Villa as well. Was one of the few players to really perform under Steven Gerrard. I think he's got better under Unai Emery. And if it wasn't for another Birmingham-born midfielder, taking all the headlines in the last couple of years, and Jude Bellingham, I think people would be far more excited about Jacob Ramsey. I think he's a really, really good player.
He's unlucky not to be in the England squad. I don't know whether he's in the 21s or something like that, but there's a few
candidates. Over Conor Gallagher.
Yeah, I totally
had a better
agree.
year.
Since Unai Emery came in, he's been unreal, although he has at times played out a little bit further out on that left-hand side, hasn't he? But yeah, I think Jacob Ramsey's a good shout too, but I don't think any of these players,
they're not
they
at the
just
level
don't
of Saka,
come close to that level, do they, of Saka?
This has been far too good mannered so far too agreeable.
I think it's
but
gonna
on the
kick off,
subject, we've been speaking about Brighton, and Roberto De Zerbi has obviously got a lot of praise this week. Manager of the Year. Now, this one, I think this, in terms of like the Manager of the Year award in the Premier League, I think this is the most hotly contested I've seen it in a number of seasons. All across the table, we've had really standout managerial displays. Joseph, who have you gone for?
I've gone for Eddie Howe.
Okay.
I think if Mikel Arteta,
Round 3, baby.
if Pep wins the treble, then there's no doubt it's Pep Guardiola. But as we sit here today, he hasn't won the treble. And I think what Eddie Howe has done with that club is absolutely masterful. I know that Doogie is not going to put him even in his top 5 Premier League managers of the season. I would have him 1 or 2. 1, Pep, probably if he goes on to win the treble. 2, Eddie Howe. And Eddie Howe jumps to 1 if he doesn't win the treble, because I know the expectation was probably 7th place finish this season, but we are talking about the 3rd best team in the country by quite some distance as well. I think Manchester United might finish 3rd, but they've kind of scratched and scraped to get to that position with a much stronger squad than Newcastle have got at their disposal. Players like Sean Longstaff playing significant minutes this season, Almiron contributing double figures of goals. And let's not forget, this is a club that he took over in 19th position. Yes, he spent, a large amount of money, £200+ million in terms of net spend. I think they are right up there. But we're talking about, I think, 2nd best XG against, 3rd best XG in the league. We're talking about a really structured side that are one of the best pressing units in the division. If I want to watch a game, I think Newcastle is one of the most enjoyable games and teams to watch in the entire division. The way they press, the way they defend, the way they counter-attack with rapid speed. The production's got to have a player like Alexander Isak. Callum Wilson's got 18 goals, I think. These are big numbers. He's got 3 players on double figures of goals. Joe Willock, who I'm going to talk about as another player coming up, I think has had a breakthrough as being one of England's best central midfielders this season at just 23 years of age. Joe Linton is a totally redeveloped and played in a role that suits him down to the ground. He's playing Dan Burn at left back, and we're talking about a 3rd best team in England. Fabian Schär at centre half. 2-3 years ago, people were writing Fabian Schär off as a Premier League potential forgettable player. I think that this has just been an absolutely remarkable job, and Eddie Howe, for me, is the guy for this answer.
Strong, very strong argument there. Doogie, you don't have to give a rebuttal to Eddie Howe, because I feel like you've explained yourself enough with that. But you're also welcome to if you'd like to.
I think everyone's seen
if you'd
that.
Like to scratch that itch.
If you haven't seen that, go and watch Teen Talk.
It gets heated. Who would you go for?
Well,
because you've now got the choice of Arteta and Pep.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't have to be Gary O'Neill.
I mean, a few weeks ago when I was asked this, I was very hot on Gary O'Neill. Still am, but they've lost their last 3 games. They've got that massive game against Everton this weekend, which will decide the Premier League relegation battle, potentially. They've had a great year, but he's probably not manager of the year now. I think with the way things have gone, I'm angling towards Pep Guardiola. And I know it's boring, but I think it's boring,
mate. It's boring.
But it's boring, but it's also right, I think. I think it's just right. I know I'm getting maybe carried away with what they've done in Europe as well, where I think they put in 2 of the best performances that I've seen in Europe over the last 5-6 years by any team against Bayern Munich, and particularly that one against Real Madrid. But even in the league, they were on track for 87 points, I think, for the first 21 games. They've now gone close to 100 in the last 16. They're 25 games unbeaten. And I think people have slightly overlooked how bad they were around the turn of the year. I remember watching that game. I think me and Joe did it, one of those reaction pieces we did on Football Daily around that time, the United game, where you beat them 2-1. It was that Bruno Rashford offside goal game. And City were dreadful. They were bad. They were so bad. They couldn't even complete a pass. They were passing the ball out of play. And then he went through that phase of trying Bernardo Silva as a sort of floating left back. And it did take a while for it to stick. But oh my goodness, has it stuck in the last few weeks. And if they go on and win the treble, it is one of the most remarkable achievements in English football history. And I think we'll all look a little bit silly if we go Eddie Howe for Manager of the Year when they are potentially very strong favourites to win a treble.
Okay, another strong argument.
Also, I like Eddie Howe.
Liar.
Yeah, not buying that. This is a really tough one, I think. I see both your arguments. I actually would have gone personally for Mikel Arteta. I think Arsenal's capitulation in the last month has overshadowed what has actually been a remarkable season. Managerially, I think he the way he's transformed that club in the last 18 months to 2 years is remarkable. Pep, I think the one thing that brings down the argument is that this is the Premier League. This is solely the Premier League. And I think it's very impressive that City have been able to challenge on all fronts, as well as take on a very strong Arsenal side and beat them in the Premier League title race. But I'm not going to take necessarily into account City's performances in the Champions League here. I do agree. I think Newcastle's position when Eddie Howe came in compared to where they are now, and actually even with the budget that they've had, you wouldn't have expected them to become a top 4 side. And actually, I was looking at it at the kind of numbers in the last couple of days, and okay, Arsenal have dropped off, and that their heads have been gone a bit in the last few weeks, but Newcastle are now even profiling above Arsenal in many metrics, just behind Man City in the Prem now in terms of kind of expected goals against, in terms of expected goals, expected points, etc. And that is really remarkable. So I'm going to give it to Joe here.
Let's go. It is Eddie Howe. And Doogie hates it.
He's had a great year. He's had a great year. But I'd also like to give a shout out to De Zerbi, to Unai Emery, to Roy Hodgson. I think there's been some really good managerial performances.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure I've missed some off.
Yeah. Who else is there? Anyway, let's move on. Eddie Howe takes that one. We're now getting into Unsung Hero territory. Unsung Hero.
I like
obviously
my
quite a loose one here. But yeah, I will start with you, Dukes, this time. Who do you think has not got the praise they deserve this year?
I think Miguel Almiron has gone under the radar in terms of his work this year. Yes.
Look at him sucking up to Newcastle fans.
No, I'm not just saying this. Like, literally, he did not have a very good Premier League. He had a terrible Premier League record in terms of goals and assists before this season. I think he'd scored 7 goals in 100 games. He started this season really poorly. I think he got 1 in his first 7. And then, before the World Cup came at just the wrong time for him. He was absolutely electric through October. He won Premier League Player of the Month. I think he scored 8 goals in 9 games. In those 9 games, Newcastle won 7 of them and drew 2 of them. That took them from 11th to 3rd. And this was a time where Callum Wilson wasn't playing as well. This was a time where Alexander Isak wasn't a starter in this side, and he got them into 3rd, and that's a position that they've never really relinquished, and he's finished with 11 goals this season. And I just think for such an unfashionable player that no one really rated in terms of his output, at least, I think everyone thought, this is a hard-working player that can look quite entertaining on the ball, quite aesthetically pleasing to watch, Miguel Almiron, but not much end product, and maybe a little bit lightweight. So for him to turn that around and to finish with 11 goals, he has slightly overperformed his XG. I think he's at around 8. But I think without that spell, I don't think Newcastle would be in this conversation, and Eddie Howe wouldn't be manager of the year. So I think Miguel Almiron, respect to Miguel Almiron.
Yeah, I think I definitely had an amazing purple patch. He definitely had an amazing purple patch, but I think he's been too in and out of the side at the second half of the season to be a consideration here for me. I think you've got to be looking at a player who has been a consistent factor in a very dominant side, but feels like he gets no praise and isn't talked about. And I think the simple answer here is Joe Willock. He started 31 games in Newcastle's central midfield. I can't name many 22, 23-year-olds across Europe's top 5 leagues that are having that big of an impact in the 3rd best side in the league consistently. His numbers are absolutely outrageous. His ball progression numbers, his passing into the final third, his physicality on and off the ball, his contribution in front of goal and in shot creating actions are just sky high. When he arrived from Arsenal, I think everybody obviously had that amazing loan spell where he scored loads of goals, but then I think there was a kind of thought process going on amongst the general public, which was also, it's an overpay. It's a big overpay just because he's had that little purple patch for Newcastle. Is that a good fee? I think like £20 million, or was it £23 million what they paid for him? Looks like an absolute snip now.
Playing a different position now as well.
Homegrown midfielder who can play box to box, who can play in a front three, who is extremely physical, a press leader. And nobody ever mentions him. Like, if he wasn't injured, he would have been an absolute shoo-in for me of the England squad. 100%. He would potentially have even been a starter for me in that England setup at the moment. He's that good. And nobody talks about him. They talk about Bruno Guimaraes. They even talk about Joe Linton more. They talk about the forward line and Alexander Isak and Callum Wilson. I just don't ever see Joe Willock's name in headlines. And I think that's crazy, given he's played 35 Premier League games this season in the 3rd best team in the league, and he's 22.
I can't handle this Newcastle loving.
Interestingly, my pick would have also been a Newcastle player. I feel like they're quite easy to pick out, aren't they? It would have been Dan Burn for me, I think, left back. Not even a left back playing at left back. There was so much talk last summer of them getting in a new left back, and obviously Target was there as well. But he, I think given they're pretty much the best defence in the league, I think he doesn't get drawn out for praise as much as Trippier, Schär, and Botman. So that would have been my pick. I think.
I had a couple of other shouts.
I had
a couple of other shouts just before we come down on the decider. I think Solly March deserves a big shout out. Massive goal and assist contributions this season. But I was actually going to say Pascal Gross at Brighton, who's played in about five different positions under De Zerbi. He's filled in at right back. He's played in that sort of right half space. He's played in central midfield. He consistently contributes in forward areas, but he's also very, very calm on the ball, which is exactly what De Zerbi needs when he's looking to use that build-up play from deep. I think Pascal Gross, since arriving in this league, has been nothing but incredibly consistent. Every week he's a 7 out of 10. And I think there was probably some thoughts that when De Zerbi came in a slightly more mobile style of football than Graham Potter, maybe a player like Pascal Gross would struggle, but it just looks like he's got a strength to strength. So I wanted to give Pascal Gross a shout out here as my kind of second pick.
I think he's right up there for creative numbers in the league as well, like third or fourth.
Yeah, still. And despite playing at right back, he has been remarkable. And also we kind of forget that when Potter was still there at the start of the season, he was banging the goals for them, wasn't he? He was their kind of main goal threat. Any other shouts, Dukes, before we move on? Or before I would decide?
I didn't have any ready.
Douglas Luiz was another one of mine. Aston Villa.
I think Gabriel probably went slightly under the radar for the first 2/3 of the season at least. I think everyone was giving Saliba a lot of credit. I actually thought at points this season Gabriel was probably playing better than Saliba. I might shove Gabriel in there.
Yeah, nice. I think Joe edges it again with Joe
Newcastle
Willock, I'm afraid.
Yeah, come on the Toon Army.
In some ways, I would go for Pascal Gross, but I think we'll go for a Newcastle player because I think that there are players in that team who deserve praise over others. I think with Almiron, I would say. Yeah, he has been.
Where would they be without him? Where
would they be without him? But I feel like he did when he was in that great patch. I feel like he did get the kind of praise that he deserved because he was sensational.
He did score some unbelievable goals.
Unreal.
He Brentford and Fulham, unbelievable.
Some of the best moments of the season for sure. But I feel like he did get that praise. On to the other side of things now. This is where it could get incredibly tasty. Most overrated.
I'm not walking away with an L here. Seriously.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't you take it away again?
Fine. I think he hasn't gone nearly enough stick this season for a really, really poor year. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but I think Edison has been really bad this year for Man City. It's kind of gone under the radar because City have been on this unbelievable run. But his save percentage is under 62% this year. It's in the bottom 5 in the league.
His post-shot XG is pretty stinky as well.
It's -5.
Yeah.
I think there was a stat at one stage this season where in 9 of the 15 recent games he'd played, he conceded with his first shot on target. And he's had some good games in the Champions League, but I think in the Premier League, it has gone under the radar how bad Edison has been. Behind a defence that has been excellent in the latter half of the season, behind a team that sees 65% of the ball, the highest percentage in the league. I think if City hadn't won the league, he'd kind of be the first person I pointed my finger at.
I love that. Joe, any?
I think there's a few shouts. I think Fabinho has had a really suspect year, but I don't know whether you can categorise him as overrated because I feel like that's been quite highly publicised. I think Andrew Robertson has taken a big step back this year as well, but seems still to be, in many people's thoughts amongst the conversation, for best left back in the league, which wouldn't necessarily agree. I think it might be Graham Potter, though. Honestly, the answer here. I think that
even the scenario that he walked into,
I think potentially a little bit. I think he had done such a good job at Brighton, but we now see Brighton gone to a whole new level, it feels like, since he's gone. We also see a Chelsea team that he had no impact on whatsoever.
Neither's Lampard.
Very, very... I mean, are we putting Potter in the Lampard category?
No, but I'm just saying...
We have to have him as most overrated. Because people were talking about being the best English coach by a mile and should be managing England.
I just think it's a little bit harsh to say that he's definitely not in that category of best English coach when there's not a whole lot of competition except for Eddie Howe at the moment. And
people had him above Eddie Howe. People were talking about Graham Potter being a better coach.
I think he slowly built this Brighton squad as well. And yes, De Zerbi's taken them to a new level. De Zerbi might well be the better coach, but I don't think Graham Potter should be. So you don't think should be too criticised, coming into that scenario where there was players getting changed in the corridor and there was 35 players.
I think there's definitely a lot of mitigating circumstances, but the simple fact is maybe this is that I overrated what he was going to do. I thought when he arrived at Chelsea that was a good appointment and that
but you didn't want Tuchel to go. I don't think any of us did.
No, I don't think anybody wanted to or thought Tuchel should go, but even though he had, I still remember saying, I think on Sunday Vibes, that this is a good appointment. And Potter, I'm very excited to see what Potter can do at Chelsea. Disastrous tenure there. I mean, it feels like that's really hurt his reputation already. I'm not.
He's linked with Nice now, isn't he?
Yeah, and you know,
also
West
not the
Ham
best clubs manager, I don't think.
and West Ham, that's a step back from where he was at Brighton, in my opinion. I think Brighton are more advanced in their development as a squad. He had probably better sort of functions in place behind the scenes to manage that side, both upwards and downwards. To go to West Ham or to go to Nice, I think would be a pretty big admittance that it's gone badly wrong since leaving Chelsea. And you would have to say, partly, that might well be down to the fact we've slightly overrated his coaching ability.
Tough where do you stand on this?
I think with Potter, I think with the Brighton thing, I think the De Zerbi thing, I think they just got in the perfect manager to take on that project, didn't they? I think Potter has to take a lot of credit for laying the groundwork there.
He does for sure.
A club that was a relegation threatening club for many years, I think De Zerbi doesn't get them to 6th. If Potter doesn't get them to 9th last season, for that reason,
I'm also going to throw one more name. I've just thought of now, looking at my list. I was going to say it and I've totally forgotten. I think Joao Felix. I think this is maybe the worst loan signing in the history of the league.
Really?
Yeah, it's got to be a contender, isn't it? It's got to be a contender.
For the money they paid.
They paid £10 million to get him in on loan in order to change the function and the fortune of that team. They've finished 12th in the league. He's not contributed anything in terms of goals and assist numbers. Yes, he scored against Manchester United last night. He's clearly an amazing technical player, but the only way you can justify spending £10 million on a 6-month loan plus his probably 300 grand a week wages, whatever he is being paid, is that he pushes you into a position that makes that money worth it. He either takes you to Europa League where you can get revenue back, or he takes you to Champions League where you can get revenue back. They finished 12th. He's barely scratched the surface of making any impact on that team, and he's going to go back to Atletico Madrid, where he's agreed a new long-term contract, or he agreed a year further on, didn't he? He said that he wants to stay. Why on earth would Chelsea make that permanent?
I don't think they will. They shouldn't.
We're going to have to pay $100+ million to make it permanent. I think it's one of the worst loan signings in Premier League history for me.
He's up there for sure. It's up there. Radamel Falcao to United in 2014. He kind of still takes it for me, I think. But yeah, good shout nonetheless. I feel like we could say this for a lot of Chelsea signings, right? Mikhailo Mudryk at 100. However much they paid for him in January, pretty overrated. In hindsight, although I think he still has a Premier League future, but Koulibaly as well, I thought a quick shout out here. I've got Zach's shouts down here as well, and I particularly liked Southampton's data model. I quite like that one. I certainly overrated Southampton. Yeah, I certainly overrated really Southampton's data model at the start of the season. I'll get into that.
Bazunu.
Yeah, Bazunu. Oh, poor Bazunu, man. Terrible season. I'm going to give it to Dukes this one. I do like the Edison shout. I really do like the Edison shout. Underachiever now. We've spoken a lot about Chelsea. I feel like that's the obvious one to go for, right?
I think it's got to be.
It just has to be, doesn't it? Maybe you could say Todd Burley if you wanted to pick out a specific individual.
Yeah.
But, I feel like Todd Burley, it's not just Todd Burley. You've got Big Dad Egg Barley there, haven't you? You've got the Clear Lake Group. So I feel like he, as the face of that takeover, is taking a lot of stick. But, there's nobody else you can pick, is there, when you spend $600 million in the course of 2 transfer windows to finish in the worst position since, I think, the 80s for Chelsea, when of course they went down.
It couldn't have gone worse. It literally couldn't have gone worse.
Yeah.
I don't think there's
only relegation, really.
I mean, only relegation. That was never realistic, though. I think literally it couldn't have gone worse. They lost in the first round of both the Carabao and FA Cup, admittedly to Man City. They got through their Champions League group and got past Dortmund. Were excited for Potter to play Real Madrid, and then they sacked him and appointed Lampard to steady the ship, prepare the side for next season. And even his decisions in recent weeks, I just don't think make a lot of sense. He started Loftus-Cheek against the previous game before Man United, and he's now linked to the move to Milan. He hasn't played Mudryk enough. He struggled to get the best out of that forward line again. Enzo Fernandez is still not looking like £100 million player.
He was good last night.
He was good. I think he's had great patches. I just think like preparing for next season was the way to go. And I just think he's made so many bizarre calls, to be totally honest. And I put it on Twitter last night. I think like Chelsea should be more realistic. Like finishing 6th next year, I think would be a great year for Chelsea, given where they are this year. And they'll point to that year they finished 10th. But they'd won the league the season prior to finishing 10th. And they had, Hazard, Diego Costa, Fabregas, John Terry, Pedro. It was still an elite side, whereas this is a squad that has so many great ideas of players in there, but there's actually there's no components of a very good team in here that are actually functioning as great players at the moment. We've got big belief that Sterling can come good. Fernandez is obviously a great player. Badiashile, Wesley Fofana, I think, has been terrible recently. I don't think there's enough to base on to be like, Pochettino can come in and get this side top 4 instantly. I think the competition is so high between that 2nd and 6th, 7th range next year that I just can't see Chelsea just waltzing back into it.
Yeah, even look at the likes of Brighton.
Yeah.
They're not going to get worse.
Newcastle, going to get better.
Villa.
Yeah.
Under Unai Emery with a full summer of transfers, they're going to get better. This is going to be extremely hard for them to break into. And it's not done irreparable damage, but it's done major damage to the confidence of these young players. I see a lot of people on Twitter saying, just play the youngsters. I think by playing youngsters in really bad moments, you can do long-term serious damage to their development just by hammering their confidence week in, week out. If a player is crap every week, playing in a crap team that can't function, their confidence as a player in the long term just does take hits.
Yeah, but on that note, then why didn't they let Chukwuemeka go to the World Cup with England? And they kept him back to play minutes, and he's barely played at all.
It's bizarre.
The decision-making at that club from top to bottom, ever since the takeover, has been nothing short of really disastrous, I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, there's no two ways about it. I think it's the biggest underachievement in Premier League history, right? I think that I can't think of a big club who have performed so badly after such a big,
I agree.
No one spent that much, have they? So it's just ridiculous. Moving on then to best newcomer. I think there's a lot of tasty ones in here. We've probably spoken about a few of them already. Joe, you're chomping at the bit, so take us away.
Because there's only one answer, and it's Roberto De Zerbi. I think it's just an absolute tap-in. I think he actually plays the best football in the entire league. I think he plays better football than Man City. Brighton, even when I watched them against Man City, the way they play out from the back, it's just remarkable. This is a side who are taking the most shots per 90 of any side in Europe. More than Madrid, more than Bayern, more than Barca, more than PSG, more than Man City. I think they enjoy the 4th highest possession. They certainly play out from the back better than anyone in the league. And with Jason Steele in goal. No offence to Jason Steele, but I personally didn't see it. I'm sure Doogie, as a Sunderland fan, definitely didn't see it. And then you look at the back line, Dunk has come through that Brighton Academy. Yes, he's a fantastic player, but again, he's gone to new levels under Roberto De Zerbi. Levi Colwill, extremely young, obviously extremely talented, and will probably want to stay there, but might be forced back to Chelsea. Him and Webster kind of rotating in and out. Fine. They've had problems at right back. That's made no difference whatsoever. The midfield two of Caicedo, McAllister, unbelievable, and are now probably going to get sold for upwards of £150 million as a pair. And then he's embedding every week a new 19-year-old into the side. Matoma is not 19, obviously I think he's 26, but Trossard, who was across the first half of the season their best player probably, certainly their highest scorer, forgotten about, sell him. He's made huge decisions to sell him, to remove Caicedo from the playing squad and the training squad when Arsenal were interested, and then bring him back into the side. There's been no issues with that. And Ciso, teenager, bedded in. Buonanotte, teenager, bedded in. Evan Ferguson, teenager that's been bedded in. I just don't think that I've seen a manager come to the league and be as good as him. I just can't even recall the last time that happened. Like, there's obviously examples.
Especially coming in midway through the season,
exactly,
or like a few months in.
Exactly. Yeah. And Brighton obviously had great foundations there, led by Graham Potter, and Tony Bloom is nothing short of a genius, frankly, in terms of ownership. But the way they play football is, oh my God, it's like you can't speak highly enough about it. I think that next year they will put together a very concerted effort for the Champions League, as long as they can replace those two central midfielders correctly. And I think, to be honest with you, Tony Bloom probably will. Like, James Milner will play there and he'll look like bloody McAllister, won't
Him and Dahoud.
Yeah.
Best midfield.
I think it has to be De Zerbi, man. I think it has to be.
Any thoughts, Dukes?
Yeah, I think Roberto De Zerbi is a really good shout, to be fair. I think the treatment he got from some notable pundits when he joined the league showed a lack of research and a bit of a lack of respect, to be honest, because really underrated job at Sassuolo, consistently finishing around that 8th area, improved players at that side, Domenico Berardi, etc., sold players very effectively to bigger sides like Locatelli, Demiral, Politano, and was doing a really good job at Shakhtar before the war started as well. So he's done a great job. I'd be happy for you to give it to him. I actually went for a player, and I've gone with Manuel Akanji. I feel like no one really took much notice of it when he signed last summer. I think it was only around £15 million, although there are a few different reports that it might be closer to 20, 25. But either way, a pittance really in Premier League terms. And he'd had a really injury-hit time at Borussia Dortmund. I think he'd missed at least 10 games in 3 of the last 4 seasons. And a lot of notable errors in that defence as well during his time there. That was Dortmund's Achilles heel for a number of years. But I think he's been almost error-free in his entire time at City, and he's played the most minutes out of any City defender. He leads that City side for tackles and interceptions in terms of defenders, blocks as well. His aerial record's not actually that good, which I was quite surprised by. I think he only wins about 40%, which is quite low, especially for a big guy. But I think the fact he's played at left-back, he's played at centre-back, he's played at right-back as well. He's been a crucial component of City getting over the line this year, in a year which Laporte has dropped off, or at least been dropped out of the starting 11, and obviously they made so many changes to that front line. And Manuel Akanji has come in and been one of the most underrated, if not one of the signings of the season. So I think he's going to be up there for best newcomer as well.
Yeah, I do like that shout. My pick was going to be a player as well, actually, at Brighton, Kaoru Mitoma. I just think for a player who hadn't even signed a professional contract until, 2-3 years ago, and had not played in top 5 league before, obviously had been bought by Brighton and then went on loan to the Belgian Pro League last year.
Yeah.
For him to come in and very quickly look like one of the 5 best attackers in the league is pretty remarkable. But I'm going to give it to De Zerbi. I think De Zerbi is in terms of an impact of a manager coming in, partway through a season. I agree. I cannot think of someone who's had quite that impact. Moving on then, biggest surprise. Feel like this could tie in a little bit with Newcomer as well. Who took you by surprise this season? I'll start with you, Dukes.
Well, I think Roy Hodgson's return took me by surprise, how well that's gone. Massive respect to him at 74, 75 to get Palace playing as well, to get Eze into the England squad. I mean, Eze's done that on his own back, of course, but really helped him in recent weeks. But I've actually gone with Marco Silva because...
I've got the exact same.
Nice. Because we actually didn't... confer beforehand about who we're going to go for, so that's the first time. But Marco Silva, I think in lots of his previous jobs he'd started very well and then dipped quite badly. So at Everton, for example, I think he got them to 8th in his first season there, but then in his second year I think they only won 4 out of their first 15 league games, and their form up to that, over the last 38 games I think they've taken around 40 points or so they're in sort of relegation territory, so it was a kind of deserved sacking. They eventually got in Ancelotti that year and they finished quite comfortable. So I was a little bit concerned when he got the Fulham job, and he'd been out of work for about 18 months, but absolutely smashed the Championship last year. And then they're finishing 10th this year. I don't think they can finish any lower than that. I think they've won exactly the same amount of games that they've lost. And this is a side that I had for 19th this year. Not ashamed to say it.
I think I had them 20th.
Yeah, I had Bournemouth below them. Neither of those going down, of course. Neither Nottingham Forest as well. They've all done excellently. But I think the way he's integrated some of the bigger names, of course, Mitrovic, João Palhinha, Bernd Leno's done really well. But some of the newcomers as well, or some of the players that hadn't really got that much credit before, like Bobby De Cordova-Reid's had a really good year. Harrison Reed's had a great year. I think Anthony Robinson's shown flashes. Tim Ream's probably put through the best season of his career as well. So I think Marco Silva has gone under the radar this year, and that's surprised me. And hopefully he can keep it going next year, because their stats, their underlying numbers, are not very impressive.
Yeah, they're ugly.
Yeah, definitely a surprise. I'm happy to go with that. I think I had Arsenal's title challenge. I was quite surprised by that. But I think Marco Silva is
that's a good shout.
worthy of that. quite a few surprises this season, haven't there? I think we would not have expected the table to be as it is, but we'll get onto that in the worst prediction section at the end. So stick around for that because that's going to get fun. Biggest redemption now. We talk about Fulham. My pick was Tim Ream. Especially first half of the season, he was brilliant, and also had quite a good World Cup for the USA, despite second round can't be sniffed at. But boys, what would you say biggest redemption?
Do you want to go first, Joe?
I think definitely the most obvious one, and I think it would almost be wrong not to give it to him, is Granit Xhaka. Given what he went through at that club, the relationship with the fans, the way he was viewed by, I think, the wider footballing world as almost this sort of joke figure who's too combative. The fans hate him. He's a bit of a meme. When he took the shirt off and stuff like that, it was seen as very much this guy, he might never play for Arsenal again. That was the serious conversation amongst a lot of people. This guy may never play for Arsenal again. He's certainly never going to captain the club again. This season, he has been a monster for Arsenal in a totally revised role, playing much higher up the pitch. It feels like he is a leader amongst that dressing room. Given the dressing room is so young, they definitely look to him as one of the more experienced figures. I think he's been as vital as anybody else in that side, really, to Arsenal's success and the way they play football. He's scored some big goals. He's contributed in an attacking sense that I never thought he would be able to do, and he certainly hasn't really done in the past. So I think in terms of redemption, it's hard to look past Granit Xhaka just for his story. I also think Tyrone Mings, since Unai Emery has come in, has been remarkably good. I definitely thought that he was a player that needed replacing in the summer, but back in the England setup, been maybe a candidate for their player of the year alongside, you'd say, Douglas Luiz, Ollie Watkins. I think without him, they just look all over the place at the back, and you would have to say that that's also a redemption arc. But for me, it's just got to be Xhaka.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens when Diego Carlos comes back from injury as well. Whether it's him or Konsa that makes way, or maybe Diego Carlos just doesn't get into that side. We shall see. I actually went with Jack Grealish for biggest redemption because I think people last year 3 goals and 3 assists in the league after £100 million move. The Twitterati were out in force saying that's a shocker of a year. I think it was better than people gave it credit for. But this year he's upped his numbers, particularly in that post World Cup period where I think a few of the City players came back not in the best moment, really. Personally, I think Phil Foden was struggling that time. Calvin Phillips obviously was called overweight in that time, and a few of the players were struggling to click. And I think Jack Grealish, of those natural forwards, Haaland's obviously taken a lot of the credit, and rightly so, but Jack Grealish has been really, really solid, and 5 goals, 7 assists. I think he started 11 of their 12 Champions League games so far. And he's one of the top. He's got great numbers in the Champions League for dribbles completed.
I think he's created the most chances of any player in a single season of an English player in history.
I think he's also stepped up in key moments as well. He's got a goals versus Liverpool, Arsenal, Man United, an assist versus Chelsea in a 1-0 win. He got an assist versus Arsenal, which knocked them out of the FA Cup as well. And I'm just really pleased to see, because he's always had quite a unique skill set. But I think it's now being appreciated that you don't just have to be measured on goals and assists. Because this is a guy that his dribbling into the penalty area, his ball retention, his progressive carries, etc., have always been through the roof. And I think Pep really appreciates that now. And in a season in which Mahrez hasn't been at his best, Phil Foden probably hasn't been as exceptional as last year, or at least hasn't carried that form from the start of the year. And Julian Alvarez, Haaland and Grealish have really been those guys holding that City attack together, I think. I think Grealish's turnaround has been absolutely remarkable, and massive credit to him.
So I'm going to give it to Grealish. I just think he has been maybe my favourite player to watch in the last few months. And given that he was under so much pressure last year, and he himself said that he was struggling a bit with kind of adapting to Pep, etc. I think let's give it to Grealish.
Like a G.
Okay, on to the next one. Slim pickings for this next one, I believe. We've got for aged like a fine wine, golden oldies.
It had to be 32 or older.
Yeah. Let's just stipulate it. 32 and older. I think we were originally going for 33 and older, but then it was even slimmer. 32 and older. Who has been, favourite? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a player, but generally speaking, who is?
Well, I could do.
Aged
I
like
could
a fine
do
wine.
34 and older if you want.
Ooh.
I could do 35 and older.
Or are you going to go for
Thiago
Thiago Silva?
Silva.
No, I'm going to go for Willian. I'm going to go for Willian.
Really?
Yeah, I think
Okay,
Willian's
yeah.
been unbelievable this year, considering where he was. Like his spell at Arsenal was really poor. I think by his account, by everyone's account, and it was supposed to be one of those signings that was going to take Arsenal to a new level in terms of their experience and winning mentality, because he was great at Chelsea, I thought, for years. I always thought he got unfair stick off Chelsea fans, to be honest. But yeah, 1 goal and 7 assists at Arsenal, then went to Corinthians and was so unpopular there that he was getting sent death threats, which forced him to leave. Wow. Signed for Fulham on deadline day. I think he's got 5 goals and 5 assists at 35. At 35.
And he's been amazing.
He's been really good. Super creative. Well, I don't think it's a super creative Fulham side, but he's their best creator, I think. I think he's at 0.2 expected assists. And for that to be your best creator is a little bit troubling as well. But yeah, him, I know they've used Manor Solomon quite effectively in his position when he's needed a break, but I think he's been excellent. 5 goals and 5 assists at 35. Not to be sniffed at. Yeah, fair play.
Yeah. I mean, there's more obvious shouts, I think. Willian's a fun shout, but I think the answer is Kieran Trippier.
Boring though, isn't it?
It is boring, but he's been the best right back in the league, and he is 32, so it does count in this category.
Gundogan,
The only thing I would say is, does it count as aging like a fine wine? Because I feel like, he's just still as good as he was. Like,
he was great at Atletico.
He was good at Atletico. Maybe I wasn't expecting him to have such an impact in Newcastle as he's had, but huge leader, huge chance creation numbers, great defender. It feels like he's the perfect player for that Newcastle
His passing
system.
stats are unreal.
I also think Ilkay Gundogan, who's 32, isn't he?
But these are top players.
I know these are top players, but the answers are obvious, no? I think Thiago Silva
Joe's just going for the winter.
Thiago Silva is probably a better shout, in my opinion, than Willian. Yeah, man. 37 years old. I don't think he's had a bad game all season for Chelsea, even though Chelsea have been crap.
I don't think he's been as good as last year.
Mate, the issue has not been Chelsea's defence. Let's have that absolutely right. Like,
I agree.
I think, it was only yesterday that they had turned over, started to concede more goals than Arsenal. I think they were at a similar sort of pace, weren't they, as goals conceded per 90. And yesterday, obviously, after being battered by Manchester United, they kind of flicked over, and that was without Thiago Silva. I think when Thiago Silva doesn't play, they look pretty disastrous at the back. And the fact he's 37 and still their best player is just worrying, but it also just proves how unreal his career has been. He just keeps getting better, doesn't he? And I don't think without him, that backline can function. Even next season, I think you have to find a way of getting Thiago Silva in there, either alongside Badiashile or as a back three with Fofana one side and Badiashile the other, because you can't just play, as we saw last night, for Fofana and anyone as a single back two. It just looks awful.
Yeah, Thiago Silva has been great again, hasn't he? I'm actually going to give this one to Willian. I think it's a fun category,
it's a good answer.
And it was a fun answer. This is getting on to slightly more personal ones now to wrap up the episode. Glad it didn't happen. What were you glad that didn't happen this season, Joe?
I think my answer for this, Liverpool not get the Champions League. But I think my answer for this is going to be that Steve Cooper wasn't sacked.
Weird. That's the same as me.
Yeah. I think that's a great story. It was been so easy for Marinakis to get rid of him at many points this season. And it's really rare that a club sticks by a manager now, isn't it?
After that kind of spend as well.
Yeah, after that kind of spend and after some of those results, because they were absolutely horrible for large parts of this season, but they stuck by him. He improved the home record remarkably, and he actually, by the end of the season, found a system and a way of playing that was pretty tough to beat. And I actually think if they'd have sacked Cooper and appointed someone else, they probably would have gone down. So I think I'm going to say, sticking by Steve Cooper was my thing that I'm glad happened. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
anything to add?
No, I'd agree. I think it was looking pretty sticky at points, even as recently as sort of March, April. I think it felt like they were kind of going to go down. But yeah, those January signings in particular have really carried them through the last few weeks, like Danilo and Keylor Navas and Felipe, etc. And Morgan Gibbs-White as well. I think has had a great run in. So yeah, full credit to Marinakis for sticking by his guns, just about.
Yeah, I like that. I think what you say, Joe, as well about sack managers. We look at the kind of instability that getting rid of how Ralph Hassan has got on Southampton. That's a Southampton squad that were very much good enough to stay up, and they were relegated with 4 weeks to go of the season. You look at the other relegation candidates in terms of Leeds, probably the right decision in the end to sack Marsh. We probably should have done it earlier. And we look at Leicester,
Rodgers.
So I think in terms of that, maybe lucked out a little bit, but it is great to see that a manager who was underrated in the first instance to get them into the Premier League via the playoffs as well. And yeah, has hung on. We'll see if that's stays like that next season. Best prediction now. Time to give yourselves a pat on the back.
I found this very difficult.
And I will decide whose prediction was best.
I actually don't have one.
You don't have one?
I don't think
Sure,
I've
you said
got a
something
prediction right. I
intelligent.
genuinely can't. I was racking my brains for hours. I can't remember a prediction I've got
I
right
think
this
when you
year.
do so much content
Yeah.
and you're on 3 or 4 videos a week, it is very difficult to remember your good things.
Was there nothing on Saturday Social back in August when Rory was,
You defended Haaland.
defaming Haaland?
Waffling. I suppose, does it count that I predicted that Koulibaly would be a disaster?
Yes,
That's a
definitely
pretty good
counts. That's a
prediction.
good one.
Yeah.
He
Not
was a
a
good
lot of
defe-
people were
he
saying
came
that.
into the Premier League as a
Yeah.
pretty esteemed defender.
Yeah, and that was based purely on like
One game. Napoli Arsenal a few years
yeah,
ago.
to be honest with you, no, I think I'd seen him probably 4 or 5 times in European competition. Every time he'd been a disgrace. So when he
Okay,
arrived
yeah.
for £30 million at 32 years old on a massive wage and a massive contract, I thought this is a disastrous signing. Nowhere near mobile enough for the Premier League. Like, what are they thinking? So I'll say probably Koulibaly being a massive flop as a decent prediction.
Pretty good shout, Diggs.
I remember on deadline day in August. Now, there wasn't a lot happening, so we had to fill. It was the day that Aubameyang signed, and that was about it, pretty much. And we did like a live stream for it. And me and Hamill had a bit of a debate. I think it was maybe he was playing devil's advocate, but I was arguing that Arthur Melo was not a good signing for Liverpool, and he was saying, no, I think this will really work. And I don't know whether he was just
Shocking from Hamill.
filling an hour,
Yeah,
but
maybe
the
he
guy's
was.
played 13 minutes all season, and it's
That's a contender for worst loan signing as well. By the way.
oh, for sure. Yeah, I think he's got to be one. I don't know what his wages are like, but yeah, 13 minutes all year. He's had injury issues, but I don't know really what's gone on there. Never thought he was a particularly good player, and yeah, he struggled to break into a midfield that's been all at sea this year. So I think that's pretty good. Got to be pretty up there. I also said on Continental Club that Divock Origi was going to flop.
Yeah, you were never a fan of that.
And he did. But yeah, I've made loads of bad shouts. I've hopefully made a couple of good ones, but it was very difficult to get into the.
We'll
the
get
good
onto
ones.
that in a second. Yeah, I didn't have anything quite as spicy as any of those. I did say back in March on a whim that Leicester would go down because I just couldn't really think of anything else to say. So maybe that will come true. I did say Forest would stay up as well, and I said that West Ham would drop off. But I think the Koulibaly shout was good because I don't think I was. I thought that was.
I liked
thought he
the
would probably
signing.
be. Yeah, I thought he was probably going to be all right, given kind of his experience, given that he was coming into a defence alongside Thiago Silva. So yeah, I like that as a prediction. What did Zach put down in absence?
Oh, he was really pleased with his. He was chatting about his on the
he
group.
said, he said that Grealish was going to improve. He predicted a Marcus Rashford revival as well. So yeah, fair enough.
That's quite a good
Said
one.
that Gabby Jesus and Zinchenko's were some of the best signings of the season. Yeah. Fair play, Zach.
No,
Well done, Zach.
proof of any of these, but
No, yeah, I do. I mean, I do remember we did. I
You
think
were on that
me
episode, I
and Zach were on the episode with Hamill doing the predictions for the season, and I think I agreed as well. I think I had Jesus down as signing of the summer. Not necessarily a prediction, but and also it's quite obvious. I think I like the Koulibaly shout in that it wasn't necessarily obvious. Like it was very easy to back that signing. I think. Not the biggest price tag as well, given their other signings.
I'll react to those predictions on next week's Winners Talk.
Yeah, do
I'll
it,
do
do
a
it.
prediction reaction
Well,
featuring Chris Hamill
love
and my
it.
full 1 to 20, which is an ugly piece.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to talk about that in a second.
I don't think I put my full 1 to 20, but
I do it on Twitter
yeah,
every year.
my top 4 in that episode. Well, we'll get onto this. Maybe I'll kick off actually worst
Yeah, go on.
predictions because I did have some shockers. My top 4 was Man City, Liverpool second, Spurs third. Spurs third was a big one, I think, among the football community. Absolutely shocking. And Chelsea pipping Arsenal to 4th place.
So you only have one of the top
Horrible.
4.
So
You only have one of the top 4.
only had one of the top 4.
Right, that's the same with me.
Yeah, did not have Newcastle getting in there. Yeah, didn't have Arsenal even in the top 4. I also said that Salah would get top scorer over Haaland. I also lost a bet with Doug, saying that Haaland wouldn't get 25 Premier League goals, mainly based on fitness. I didn't think he was going to be fit for the whole season, I must
But
add.
to be fair,
but still
a lot of people
still
didn't
bad.
agree with me at the time. I was kind of like, I might lose here.
Yeah. I mean, there
20
was
times
quite,
a lot of goals.
Yeah, there was quite a lot of kind of bad feeling around Haaland, wasn't there? Kind of completely underrated ahead of the season in terms of how he'd fit into that City side. And I think most shocking of all, from my standpoint, I thought Southampton would be the kind of overachievers of the season.
Oh, no.
I thought Sekumara was a star in the making, and he was going to be brilliant.
He did have a
And
couple of good moments.
He had a
Yeah,
couple of
he
good
did.
moments in August. I was
I
like, my
prediction's
prediction's going
was it in August?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, he was absolutely. He was flying for those 2 games, and I thought I'm on for a winner here, and barely seen him since. So the bar's pretty low, boys. But like, who wants to go first? Who wants to?
Joe, why don't you take it?
I had all 3 promoted clubs to go straight back down.
Wow, and none of them are going
None
back
of them
down.
have gone back down. Obviously, I also had Tottenham third. I think Tottenham
I
third
did as
is
well.
like a resounding major L there, isn't
Yeah.
it? But I think, for me, it's probably all 3 promoted clubs to go straight back down, which just never happens either. So I don't know what I was thinking saying that.
I feel like it's easy. I feel like often people do that, and then like 1 or 2 will go down, and then you're all right. But this is, one of the only seasons where all 3 have stayed up.
They've all stayed up, yeah. So my full 1 to 20, I'm going to save some more action for next week's We Need to Talk as well. But 3 promoted clubs going straight back down.
Yeah, nice. I also had some shockers. I tend to pin mine to the top of my profile all season. I've actually got a thread up there at the moment, so I don't have it. But yeah, people comment every year, halfway through, like, you're a mug, basically.
Yeah.
And this year is actually
You're
quite bad.
a bit of a masochist in that sense.
I quite
aren't
like it. Yeah, just stick by your guns. And also, you've got to do it before the ball is kicked, not at the end of the window, which is what a lot of people do. But I had one of the better ones I had was Everton going down, which was quite a good call. But other than that, yeah, there's some shockers in there. Spurs, Arsenal 5th, West Ham 7th, Brighton as low as 11th, Leicester as high as 12th. Just not good.
Yeah, fair enough. I think, some of the mid-table ones are kind of you can kind
Much of a muchness.
Yeah, they're a bit of a much of a muchness. I don't know. I don't think any of them are as bad as my Southampton shout.
Yeah,
to be honest. So
I think
I'm gonna
judge
nominate
wins
that.
that one.
I'm gonna nominate that.
I agree.
So yeah, that was the worst prediction of the season.
Yeah.
Gonna give that to myself.
Yeah, I would agree, Mikey.
Boys, anything else you'd like to discuss about the Premier League this season as it's wrapping up in just a few hours' time?
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, stay tuned for Monday Vibes tomorrow. We're going to shoot that immediately after the games today, and then it'll be coming to your screens Monday some stage, a reaction.
Hopefully early
Because there is
afternoon or
still relegation battle to play for, isn't there? There's not loads to play for in the Premier League, but there should still be some decent reaction to those games. Let's do, right now, another prediction.
Okay.
Oh, who's going down?
Who goes down? Because we can react to it immediately.
Yeah.
We can react to this on Monday Vibes. People will be watching this on
Okay.
Sunday Vibes, reacting on Monday.
Whatever, I'll go for it. I think Everton might have enough to stay up. I think West Ham will put out a better side than people think against Leicester, and they'll beat them. And I just think Leicester are going down.
Okay, so
Sadly.
you're going Leeds and Leicester.
Leeds and Leicester.
I'm edging towards that as well. I feel like Bournemouth nothing to play for. It's Goodison Park on the final day. Yeah, I'm kind of with Dukes. I kind of feel like it makes sense. It feels like the sensible choice to back Everton to get a result there. Whereas, Leeds, Spurs, they're all at home. To be fair, it is an amazing. Like, I can't think of a relegation final day that's been as big as this. And in terms of like the size of the clubs going down, Leicester, like former Premier League winners, Leeds and Everton, like.
Yeah.
It is mad.
I'm terrified about the Championship next year.
Yeah, the Championship's going to be crazy next year. I think I'm with you, dudes. I think Everton will stay up. I think
Joe,
Everton
you
will
I'm
gonna
going to
throw
be
a curveball
different.
in
I'm
there?
going to be different. I think Leeds beat Tottenham on the final day.
Really?
I think it could happen.
Yeah, I
to
don't
be fair.
know. Tottenham just wobbling. They've only won 1 away game since January, Tottenham.
If Everton draw with Bournemouth and Leeds beat Spurs, do Leeds
Get
stay
the
up?
table up.
I feel like that might be the case, though. I do think, and that does, Leeds have a. Ooh, no, I think. Oh no! If Everton draw and Leeds win, then Leeds
They need to win by a fairly
they need to
considerable
they need to
difference.
win by like 3 basically.
Okay.
Whereas if Leicester win and Everton draw, then Leicester just stay up because their goal difference is
Leeds to
already better.
19th to 17th on the final day
Yeah,
would be
that's
great.
probably not
mad.
going to happen,
That
is
would
it?
be mad.
It's probably not going to happen.
Stick by it though. Stick by
Yeah,
it.
I'm going to stick by it. It's fun. I'm going to say Leeds stay up beating Tottenham, Everton lose to Bournemouth, and West Ham beat Leicester on the final day.
Whereas we think it stays exactly
Yeah.
as it is.
I do think there's going to be twists and turns.
There
Like
will be
I
twists and
think there's
turns.
going to be. I think all 3 might be out of the relegation zone at some point on the day before it settles.
If they are your sides, best of luck as well. It's a horrible 90 minutes ahead.
Yeah, so stay tuned for Monday Vibes. That'll be coming tomorrow. As we said, we're shooting this from the lovely Clubhouse 5. You can book your table by clicking the link in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button, hit subscribe. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.